Hey everyone, welcome back and thank you for joining me in this great next episode. We are going to be talking to Vicky Bradley today. She's going to be enlightening us about the 7 levels of leadership energy. We are going to be discussing how leaders can be more conscious leaders. And finally, and this is the one that I'm really looking forward to, is allyship with men. We need more and more men to support women. Vicky's also going to tell us, what do men do in their careers that women don't necessarily do? Let me tell you a little bit about Vicky. Vicky is a 25-year corporate executive leading a number of organizations and now an entrepreneur supporting leaders to become more conscious as leaders. Her work is one-on-one with senior leaders and with groups that are emerging and stepping into leadership roles. We are going to be talking about all of that and much more. Stay tuned for this great conversation with Vicky. If you are listening to this, there's a good chance that you're a woman in the corporate world who feels stuck in your career and you're not sure how to advance. If that's the case, I want to let you know that I have an incredible resource that can help you. I created a promotion readiness checklist with you in mind. The checklist can help you pinpoint exactly what you need to work on to advance in your career. And the best part, it's completely free and it only takes 3 minutes to complete. I have helped countless women like you achieve their career goals, and I know exactly what it takes to succeed in the corporate world. My promotion readiness checklist is a perfect tool to help you get started on your path to success. You will find the link on the episode website, or you can go on nowomanleftbehind.com to take the quiz. Vicky, thank you so much for coming on to the No Woman Left Behind podcast. I know you and I have met before, and I was on your podcast before, but how are you doing today?
Awesome, Rosie. So good to see you again and happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I am ready to dive into the conversation, Vicky. I know that you are CEO and founder of Women Leadership Empowered, and I think that's such an amazing platform to continue to help women advance in their careers. And I don't know if you are on social media at all or have heard anything about a certain football player that went out and did a commencement speech at a certain college, and that whole thing just threw me for a loop. This is a young man, and I don't want to go into all the specifics. This is a young man who's 28 and basically is thinking that women belong in the kitchen and should be happy being wives and mothers and raise our kids. And, you know, most of us are very happy being wives and mothers and raising our kids, but we're more than just that.
Absolutely.
And so let's start with, where do you think the world is today as far as women in leadership?
Great question. I did see that social post that went out, and unfortunately, I think this young man may have just shot himself in the foot. And so, what questions come to my mind is, what environment have you been raised in? And what messaging are you being taught? Women are multifaceted, and what I see happening in the world is we're figuring out how to harmonize home and family and our careers, because we are more than just a wife or just a mom or just a sister or daughter or whatever. And we've been in a society where that has been very much trying to put us in a hole, so to speak. And we're busting out of that hole. And it's not anything to put men down or to take away. And I think that's when the Me Too movement started. I think we kind of swung that pendulum so far the other way. Mm-hmm. And it takes all of us to make this world prosperous and connected and happy and healthy and whole. So, my concern is, we don't need to pit one against the other. let's figure out how do we harmonize and coexist together in a very productive and connected and happy way. Right? We learned through COVID how important connection is anyway. And so it can't be one against the other because you hurt yourself when we have that mindset. So it's how do we come together and really thrive in a world that there's so much to be grateful for and so much that we need to do together.
Absolutely. And like you said, connection is everything. And I know, and I think it's, men are great. There's so many men in the world that are incredibly supportive of women. So let's talk a little bit about, what do you know about allyship with men? I know that you work with both men and women.
Mhm.
And what is it that you think men are noticing about women leadership? How are they reacting to women? And what are they doing to support women in leadership?
Great question, Rosie. I think, as I was saying a moment ago, that pendulum has swung really far. And then, at first I only was working with women. And that was partly because of my own career path where, I never really worried about, I'm not getting opportunity because I'm a woman. That never, ever even entered my mind. I was very fortunate because the way I communicate, very direct, and I always had great male mentors, people who pushed me, to believe in myself. And I think when, we had this shift that happened, men have gotten nervous and they're asking like, what are we allowed to do? Right? Because their hands have been smacked for even the smallest things, or someone crying foul when there wasn't foul. And so I think, again, what I was saying a minute ago, we've got to find that harmony. So I did an event last May in the capital here in Canada, and that was the first time I had done an event where I had 50% turnout of men. And we were talking about male allyship and why that is so important and why we need both, right? It's if I do well, then you can't. No, it's how together do we do well. And what I observed and what I loved were so many men were leaning in and they were saying, help us be better male allies. There are a lot of incredible men who support women. They put them forward. They know that women, we are well-rounded. We're used to managing and handling multiple things at one time. And so that's partly why we make great leaders and why we're awesome at running different organizations, because we can do all these things. And smart men realize that, they recognize it, so they nurture that. They sponsor these, different women. They're always bringing their name up when they're not in the room. You have a few bad who behave poorly, but let's not blanket everyone that way, right? And so what I see happening is you have men who have become more sensitized in what they say, how they say things, how they behave. Even simple things, Rosie, like, they'll say to their male colleagues, hey, let's go have a beer after work. Well, that's when the connection happens, right? And so now they're learning women don't necessarily do that because they got to get home to older parents or kids or whatever. And so they are looking for other ways to be able to build those connections in a professional way.
Got it. Now, as far as the men that you have been working with, is there anything that you've noticed that maybe they do that women aren't doing to advance in their careers? And I know you had just mentioned, going for a beer or going, on the golf course. And I know that women don't do that, but is there anything else that maybe we're missing out, that we're not doing as women to advance in our careers that men are doing?
Yeah, and this is not new news, but we tend to not put our hand up. We tend to have to check off all the boxes. I still coach a lot of women on, why are you not putting your hand up? Why are you not walking into your boss's office and saying, hey, I know this role is coming open. I want to be put forward for it, right? Instead, we're saying, oh, I don't think I'm ready, or maybe I don't know how to do XYZ. And really, it's more about hiring people around you that have the expertise. You don't have to be the expert in everything. And that's a real distinction between men and women. Men will say, yeah, put me up for the job because I'll figure it out, right? Women do the same thing, although we're not as bold in a lot of cases in being able to put ourselves forward. I'll give you an example of a woman I was coaching. She was incredible. VP at one of our big banks, head of marketing, and a new person came on board and he told her, he said, I'm going to terminate you. He didn't even know her, right? So she's devastated. And the company came to her and they said, we have another role that we would like you to consider. And it was in risk management. And she said to them, oh, I don't think I'm qualified. So she calls me and we have this conversation and I said, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point you were the head of IT, you've been the head of marketing. How are you not qualified? And she went, oh, I didn't even think about that. And I said, look, you have the skills. And if John down the hall had 40%, he would have raised his hand and said, pick me. So to answer your question, Rosie, I think we have to say more yes. And so what if you get turned down? It's that taking that step, having that courage to put yourself forward. And what are you learning from it, right? Not being afraid to fail. Like, what am I learning from this experience? So I think that's the big thing. And, I just encourage you, say more of yes. And this is true with even our young people today too, because my son just graduated from university. And I just said this to him. I said, you need to say yes to opportunity. Yes, it can be scary, but put your foot out there anyway, right? Like try things, because that's how you find where you are meant to be.
Absolutely. I love the phrase that you just said, say more or say yes to more things. I mean, I think that's really, really key. Now, there's a lot of controversy with leaders these days. What do they do? What don't they do? Do they make people come into the office? Do they leave them? Are people being productive? That whole thing. So what does it mean to be a conscious leader where you are aware of what's happening in your company? And if you're aware that people are not happy, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah. Yeah, that's been coming up a lot lately because, our world is accelerating, especially with technology, AI. I think you and I've talked about that a bit. Like everything is moving so fast and people are like, they're choking, trying to keep up. And the demands on leaders are even greater than they have been in the past. And so there's a lot of telling, there's a lot of top down, push it, really pushing people to do even more 24/7, be in the office. And there's pros and cons to all of these things. So from my perspective, conscious leadership is about learning to respond, not react. Because we're so fast, we tend to just knee-jerk comment instead of taking that pause and thinking about things and saying, what is the best way for me to respond in this given situation, right? If your people are not happy, as an example, and that was one of the things you asked, you can take a quick pulse, right? Do we have high absenteeism? Do we have lack of engagement? Is productivity dropping? Like, there's no secret here. We see these things. So the question is, what do you do about it, right? And that starts with, usually there's a high level of distrust when that disengagement happens, right? When you start calling in sick, or I need to take a vacation day, or, whatever, usually there is a high level of distrust that's happening. And so gaining trust is about having conversations, asking questions, right? Like, tell me what is going on, right? I can see we're having a lot more people missing work. Why is that happening? What is making people not happy? Right? And how do we start to rebuild trust? And a lot of that, like a lot of the work I do is around communication, right? Usually when you're an organization that is driven by telling and top down, I'm going to tell you what to do. That is where people put the protection mode in and they go, wait a minute, they don't think I'm competent. My ideas aren't valued. They're not hearing me. They're not seeing me. When you can start to shift that into more of a positional or even a co-creative, where I'm saying to you, Rosie, we've got to do 300 million this year. What do you see the things that we can do to get there? Because you're on the front line, right? So having connection and deep conversation becomes a really important aspect. When I know that you're listening and taking suggestions that I've made, doesn't mean you're going to do everything, but you're hearing me and you validated me that I heard what you said. That's a great suggestion. Might not be able to do that right now. Maybe that's something we have to do in phase 2, right? But I've heard you. I've made a note of that. People want to feel valued. So I think that's a big part of what happens. And when we become more conscious of that, that leads us into having choices.
Yes. I like the fact that you said almost like go to the people that are in the front line and ask them, because when I was in the corporate space, one of the things that always happened is we would get, like you said, top-down direction, not asking anybody at the desk level, how is this going to impact you? Once it actually came down and we implemented it, people are like, well, wait a minute. And then they started poking all these holes and all these issues and all these questions. And we went through several situations where we would release something and then all these questions came from the staff and the our external partners, and then it was just messy because we didn't prepare and we didn't go to ask the people. And I always thought, like, what is the reluctance of going and doing your approach, asking the people at the desk level, how will this impact you? Because then you'll uncover all the things before you actually release them. So
100%, but it takes longer, right? And that's the number one pushback I get from clients when I'm working with them on how to shift from this telling communication to a co-creative, because they'll go, oh, Vicki, that just takes too long. And I'm like, but does it really? Right? So you just gave a perfect example, Rosie. You push something down, right, from the top. And then when it gets initiated, everybody's like poking holes and it's not working. And there's all these gaps that have taken place. Whereas if we had slowed the machine down a little bit, had some question, that doesn't mean you talk to everybody, but you pull some key people in, like what potentially could be roadblocks here, right? What are some of the biggest challenges you're having currently in executing, right? How do we be more customer centric? Like whatever those questions might be, but they get caught up in how quick or how slow it takes to do things. And it's that knee jerk, right? They want instantaneous satisfaction. And, sometimes it's like the tortoise and the hare. When you slow it down a little bit, you actually get really great results.
exactly. And I think the key word for me that you said there was co-creative, like co-creating. I think that's so huge because when you slow down, you get better results, and it's just more comprehensive, more holistic. The people at the desk will buy into whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then they can't come back and complain to you, well, you didn't ask me, you didn't, because it was
exactly.
so to me, I think that's like a huge win-win. What are some things that you think we can do? And I know we're going to talk about the 7 levels of leadership energy, but when it comes to leaders and how stressed they are with all of the responsibilities, all the obligations, the key performance indicators that they have to now, meet in this day and age, I think energy is just so depleted in this day and age. So walk us through, like, what are the 7 levels of leadership energy and how do we actually utilize them in the workplace?
Yeah, that I love this. and this is my, sweet spot, what I love to work with clients on. So the 7 levels of energy is really about choice, right? And so it's helping leaders understand what their actual intention is and how it's impacting, right? And so learning that you have 7 possible choices of how you respond to something. So again, it goes back to that little bit of a pause, stop knee-jerk reacting, right? And look at how you can actually serve yourself and that other person or people better, right? So how do you want to show up? How do you want to be in the world? And so one of the things I work on is the difference between catabolic and anabolic energy. Catabolic is something that's very draining. That's when we're in that high stress state that you were just talking about. And the problem with catabolic, it's okay to be there for seconds, even minutes. But if we're staying in that space for too long, that creates a lot of dis-ease and eventually turns into disease or
Yeah.
has the potential to. Okay. I'm a classic example. High stress executive running North America for a company, just had a baby, went back to work. I'm traveling all the time and my body completely shut down on me. And I wasn't listening. I had lots of signs. I was not paying attention, but I was in that high catabolic state because it was pressure, pressure, pressure. You got to perform. Anabolic is the opposite. Anabolic is, being in that space where you're highly creative. It's how we typically show up when we're in an anabolic state, unless you're a very angry or, victimized person. But anabolic is where we want to spend more of our time. And so the 7 levels of energy help you understand that flow and how we as individuals ebb and flow through each one. So just as an example, when we're in high anabolic states, we're spending more of our time in that prefrontal cortex, right? Which is where creativity comes from. It's where logic comes from, all the things that we need as executives. So it's learning how to shift from being knee-jerk reacting or angry or high stress into something that's going to serve better. I'll tell you what the 7 levels are just to give some context. So level 1 is about being a victim. Level 2 is fighter energy. Level 3 is rationalizing or taking responsibility. A lot of executives are in that level 3 energy because they're always having to rationalize the work that they're asking people to do. Level 4 is about care and concern. Level 5 is seeing opportunity. Level 6 is a visionary, and level 7 is creator, right? And so you can flow through each of these, and I'll just give an example just for the audience so you understand what I mean. But rush hour traffic, okay? If you're in a big city, especially, rush hour traffic is like our nemesis, right? We hate it. So I'm driving along to meet Rosie for, an interview, and some person runs me off the road. And my initial reaction of level 1 might be, oh my gosh, how did this person pick me out of thousands of cars on the highway today? I'm already late to meet Rosie. I need to get there, on time and have a little breather before we start talking. So that's victim energy. I only stay there for a little bit because then I move right into level 2, which is angry. I might pull up beside the person, have a few choice words, could have some sign language. Who knows, right? Level 3 is about, I was listening to that podcast, or I might have been on the phone. Maybe I veered into their lane. So I'm taking responsibility and I'm rationalizing what's just happened. Level 4 potentially sounds like, that person, maybe they just got a phone call to go pick up their kid at school because they're sick. Or maybe the guy's wife is in the back seat having a baby and he's trying to get her to the hospital. So I'm coming from a place of concern. Level 5 might sound like, you know what? I love listening to my podcast. And I know my brain goes into such a deep thought. So I've got to make sure that I'm carving out time in my calendar to listen. When did that high rise go up? I never even noticed that on my drive to work. So you start to see on a much bigger plane. Level 6 is about being a visionary. And my sense there might be, I'm going to invent a flying car. That way I'm at Rosie's in 10 minutes and I don't even have to worry about rush hour traffic, right? And somebody said to me one time, they go, Vicki, that's not reality. And I said, well, actually it is, because look at what Elon Musk did. He created the Boring Company for exactly that reason. So he created that tunnel, or he is creating that tunnel to go between LA and San Francisco. So it's all perspective, right? And then level 7 is there's no problem, there's no solution, there's no winning, there's no losing. It just is. So you have 7 choices as to how you might look at that situation. Energetically, that becomes very important, right? Because if I'm spending time in level 1 and level 2, I'm depleting my vitality. I'm losing valuable energy. When I'm able to choose how to respond with one of the anabolic levels, I'm actually in a much calmer, much more thoughtful mindset. So I know that's a quick abbreviation, Rosie, but it gives you a sense of how someone can move and ebb and flow through each of those levels. Then it becomes your choice. If you decide, yeah, today I want to feel like this, I'm pissed off, that's okay. Just don't stay there, right? And what I would say to leaders is you can look at examples of leaders, even politically. Let's take Trump as an example. He's a high catabolic individual, right? He is lashing at people. He's angry all the time. And so he gets short-term results, but long-term, he loses a lot of credibility and he loses a lot of momentum. You look at somebody, and this is just, this is through my education where people that have been in my classes, this is their feedback on the leaders. Obama, right? People see him as a high anabolic leader, and he takes that time and he listens and he sees and he values. And so you've got 2 leaders who, one getting more long-term effect than the other. And I'm not saying pick one or the other. I'm just saying this is an example of when you have leaders who are in high catabolic state, there are very short-term results.
Interesting. Hey everyone, I am so excited to announce that the Unlock the Leader Within membership is finally launched and live. This segment is brought to you by our very own No Woman Left Behind. The Unlock the Leader Within membership was designed to empower you in your corporate career to advance your career with confidence. Confidence is so lacking these days. When you join the Unlock the Leader Within membership, you will gain the ability to become a high performer. You will have your custom career roadmap and more than anything. And the thing that's most exciting to me is that we will build an amazing community of like-minded, ambitious professional women that are there to help and support and learn from each other. This incredible membership is up and running, so check it out. Go ahead and scan the QR code over here, or if you're listening to this episode, go to the episode website and click on the Unlock the Leader Within membership to check it out. And now back to our episode.
Results.
Interesting. Well, I love the example that you gave us because it's very relatable to everybody. Like everybody's been in that high traffic, and then some days to me, like people cut me off and I'm like, okay, whatever, it's no big deal. And then other days when I get aggravated, I do recognize that I'm more stressed out because I have, something going on in my life too. But I think the 7 levels of leadership energy are so important, not only for our day-to-day, but as a leader, if you are not able to be aware or even have any awareness that there's different levels and that there's different ways that you can handle situations and then react to all those situations, then you're kind of in the dark. Once you know about the 7 leadership levels, then you're more informed. And then you're trying to, not that we can stay in that anabolic all day, every day.
Correct.
But when you're in that catabolic state, like you said, you can be there shorter time so that you can recognize it and then move on to the anabolic state. But again, that example was very easy to understand, very relatable. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to you. Tell me a little bit about your journey in leadership, why you created Women in Leadership Empowered, and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, thank you. Well, I spent about, we'll say 25 plus years don't want to give away my age. 25 plus years in corporate and both Canada, US, and the UK, and absolutely loved it. And as I was sharing earlier, my body completely shut down on me. And when that happened, my doctor said to me, Vicki, you're never going to be able to work again. And I was like, oh, that is not an option for me. I am not that person. My brain needs to stay stimulated and active. And so I did some soul searching, Rosie, and I was like, what is it that I love about the work that I've been doing all these years? And it came back to people, and especially women, in helping women have the courage to say yes to more and have the confidence to know that you do have these amazing superpowers and how to use those. And so as I was figuring this out, initially it was like, I'm going to work with women one-on-one, and which I do. And I continue to evolve this business. And then I had a client come to me and he said, Vicki, I have 12 high potential females in the IT industry, which is heavily male dominated, right? And he said, I need help with getting them ready for senior leadership. So would you come in and work with us? And I spent a year working with this group, and phenomenal women. And at the end of that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. Like this is a business opportunity. So I created Women in Leadership Empowered. And it was really not just about skills, like soft skills or power skills development. It was also about the networking, the peer-to-peer mentoring, and the coaching, because it's not I said this to somebody the other day, you can't have one session and go, oh, now I know how to do everything. It's about building, especially for women, it's about building that network around you, that support system that helps you to say yes, right? Or if you're balancing having kids and working, yes, you can do it. But it's nice to have other women that are experiencing the same thing that you can have conversations with. So I keep evolving. And as I was sharing earlier with male allyship, so men started coming to me and saying, well, Vicki, would you coach me? Like I want help because I want to be a better ally. And so I've started taking on more and more men because of that reason, because they are asking, because they want to be better allies. So it continues to evolve, Rosie. And for me, it's really, I see the glass half full. And so I know that the journey I went through health-wise was, some people have said to me, oh my God, how awful. I mean, I couldn't even walk. I was a mess. And it was literally the best thing that ever happened to me, because it's brought me to where I'm at today. And the impact I get to have with helping people to be more conscious as leaders and to be, having more choices as to how they want to show up. Like that is powerful, because it's easy to go with the status quo and push stuff down and tell people what to do. When you truly actualize the leadership abilities you have, like think of the impact you get to have on the world. And to me, that's priceless. So that's kind of why I do what I do.
Absolutely. And did you recognize, and I think I'm going to call it burnout just to make it easier, but where you were at that time where you were really stressed out and your body started breaking down, did you recognize those signs beforehand? Were you aware that you were that stressed out and that you were heading towards this, body breakdown at all?
Well, great question. No, I didn't think I was stressed at all. I absolutely loved the work that I did. I loved traveling all the time. So that's where it was interesting, because my head was in one place and my body was somewhere else. And I had signals, yes, many actually, and I would fluff it off because I had a bit of this, trying to think of what the correct word would be, but I have to be there. I have to do this. I have to, help my people be successful. And my heart was in the right place, but it was taking a toll on me physically. And so it started with little things, right? Like my back was bothering me. I'd get off an airplane and I was having a harder time standing up. I'd be walking through a plaza and having to hang on to the railing, right? And people would be like, "Are you okay, Vicki?" And because I'm a high energy person, and I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just, maybe I'm a little tired right now. I've been on 3 flights in the last 3 days," right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I would just make excuses for it. And then, I mean, I developed an autoimmune issue, which is what, my challenge is. And then when it happened, it took me 18 months to figure it out. And that
Mm.
was going to different doctors and, people going, "I don't know what's wrong with you," and doing all kinds of alternative medicine and practices. But the reality was, Rosie, it was what was going on internally, because I was out of alignment with what I was supposed to be doing. And, sometimes we think, "Oh, we're in this career and we have to stay in this career." And you don't. I said to somebody yesterday, I said, "Stop being afraid of being fired, because that might be exactly what needs to happen to open you up to what you really should be doing."
Mm.
And she just kind of looked at me and she went, "Wow, I've never even thought of it that way." And I said, "Well, think about it, right?" Like I said, spend some time reflecting on why you're doing what you're doing, right? And do you love it as much as you think you do?
Yeah,
So
totally. I'm a certified high performance coach, and one of the things we do is we take 12 weeks, and every week we have a different theme, and it's almost like peeling back the onion. That's kind of what I
yes.
thought about when you were talking about, because even your health journey, taking 18 months to kind of figure out what was really happening, it's a journey. You can't just figure it out from one day to the next. And so, how did you decide to focus on women to begin with? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, it's a question I, I always ask myself. Um, what really drove it was, through my career, I tended to always hire women. And, when my last role with the Bombay Furniture Company, my entire executive team was female except for two. And it was always my two men that were always saying yes. And my women were not as much. Right. And so that was really the catalyst where I was like, okay, why are these women not seeing all the skill and the passion and the knowledge that they have? And how do I help women bring that to the forefront? Because we need more of that in our world. That's how we're going to shift this mess I think we're in. Right. And so that was really what drove me, and just helping women find the confidence to speak up, right? Be seen, be heard. Don't make yourself small. Be bold. And that doesn't mean you walk in a room and, alienate men or other people. It's about being conscious of that, but being conscious of who you are and what your contributions could be. So possibility, right? And so turning what's invisible, making it more visible.
I love that. And, so interesting, because so many of us that are in the space that we are, whether it's coaching, leading in some way, shape, or form, we're doing what we're doing because of our experiences, right? Because Vicki, never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. When I was younger, I was like, nope, I need to have my paycheck in the bank every 2 weeks. And now that I'm here, and it wasn't even like I made a choice. I started volunteering, yes, slowly but surely. But then I found myself speaking up and speaking out for those younger women that are coming out behind me and saying, hey, you kind of like you need to speak up, you need to advocate for yourself. And, through some research that I've done, I think Robin F. Goodman figured out or discovered that girls' confidence peaks at age 9 years old. And so I think, in this day and age, there's so many women and people just in general pushing collectively for that gender parity, gender equity, and we're all wanting the best for those women that are coming up behind us. And like you said, I think collectively we're going to be able to shift things around. It's going to take time, but we have to continue to have conversations like these. And I know there's so many, conversations like these happening, but to your point earlier, I talk about, apply anyway, because men apply with having 50% of the skills. When I go and do talks, there's still like majority of people still don't know that statistic. So it's still very important for us to bring awareness to women and just people in general. Now, kind of going back to the 7 levels of leadership energy, how can someone work with you with these 7 leadership levels of energy?
Yeah, so when I start working with a client, that's the first thing I do. And I will also just do, if somebody said to me, hey, Vicki, I'd like to just try the assessment, right? It's called the Energy Leadership Index Assessment. And Forbes actually ranks that as one of the top 3 that every executive should go through, because it's not a personality test. It's highly subjective, but it's more about what are your attitudes, belief systems, and perspectives. And so it really gives you insight as to what is helping me to excel, but where might be my blind spots? What holds me back, right? And so it gives you a really good foundation of understanding how you show up in the world as a person, as a leader. And so they can, people can come to me and just do that if that's what you're interested in. But I also do, lots of different coaching packages. And so that is one thing I do ask my clients to go through, just because it's so incredibly powerful. And when you practice it, it's like, this is how I try to describe it to people. It's like going to the gym, right? You want to go and build muscle. You can't go once and do barbells, right? And get those biceps looking good. You got to practice, you got to keep increasing your weight. And so it's a process. And if you really want to understand how to be more responsive than reactive, then it's worth that investment for yourself. And you can find that on our website at www.wilempowered.com, which is the WIL Empowered with 1 L. And it gives you, lots of information about that, or just reach out to me directly. You can reach me at Vicki@wilempowered.com or on LinkedIn. Happy to have just a free discovery call and, chat with you or answer any questions that people might have about the assessment.
Wonderful. Well, I will link all of your links in the show notes for sure. And Vicki, thank you so much for all of the information that you've given us. I'm wondering if maybe there's one takeaway tip that you can leave the audience with from today's conversation.
Yeah, the one thing I think that is probably most important is really developing that self-awareness skill, right? And so what I would encourage people to do is when you're having conversations, be highly conscious of what your intention is, and then ask questions as to how it might have impacted the other person, right? We don't check in enough to say, Rosie, we were talking about the energy leadership. So what is your takeaway from that conversation? Because it's a great way for you to check if you've been really clear on your communication and what you were intending that person to walk away with. We all live in our own realities because of our environments and, all the competing priorities that are coming at us. And so oftentimes that's where we have breakdowns, is we think we're communicating one thing and it actually impacts somebody in a different way. So that would be that's not an easy one, I know, but just even that little bit of nuance, if you can start to, ask those questions about what are you taking away from our discussion today? That's a really huge one.
That is incredible. And it's just, what is your intention? How was it perceived? Because to your point, when you're not checking how it's being perceived or how it's impacting other people, that's when the communication breakdowns start. So I totally agree with that. And I love that actionable tip. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'll just give one more example, if that's okay, Rosie.
Sure, yes.
Like one of the things, so when I go in and I'm working with groups, that's one of the things I work on with them in that communication, because, and you would get this as well with your background in corporate leadership, a leader gives direction and then the troops walk out and Vicki picks up one thing, Rosie picks up something else, John's got a totally different perspective. And that's where we get the gaps. That's where we get the breakdowns. And so if you just pause and take those extra couple of minutes to ask for that takeaway, then you know, because it's a check for you as a leader, how your communication is being translated, but it's also how are people listening, right? So anyway, I just share that because that's a huge one in especially team environments.
Yes. And we saw that because we had 7 different teams. And then sometimes, so I was the executive vice president over leadership and development for the underwriting team, and we had 7 different teams. And so sometimes I would talk to this team and they're like, well, we're doing it this way. And then another team is doing it completely different. I'm like, where did you guys get, like, we gave the same direction and then
Yes.
people started doing it completely differently. So totally get that for sure. All right, Vicki. Well, thank you again so very much for you taking your time to come in and being on the No Woman Left Behind podcast. This has been a great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. All right. What a great conversation that was with Vicki. I guess for me, my biggest takeaway was our discussion around the 7 levels of leadership energy and how to utilize them. So Vicki introduced the concept of the 7 levels of energy, and she highlighted the distinction between catabolic energy and anabolic energy. And the way I took the catabolic energy is that that's more destructive, and the anabolic energy is more constructive. She explained how understanding and utilizing these levels of energy can make us more conscious leaders. And one of the things that I think with the catabolic and anabolic energy, once you are aware of those energies, you're more aware of how external triggers can really impact you. And by knowing these 7 levels of energy, you are able to moderate your reactions based on what happens to you in the world. So you're able to go from that catabolic, which is a destructive energy, move out of there much more quickly because you know that you should be in the anabolic energy. So again, those 7 levels of leadership energy were fantastic. Vicki left us with one final takeaway tip. She emphasized the importance of us developing self-awareness in communication. That is, she encouraged us to really understand what we're saying, but more than anything, how we are showing up for other people. Meaning, when you say something, how are other people taking it? And the only way you can know that is by seeking feedback on how people are receiving your messages. So, by checking in with others, and figuring out what their takeaways were from your discussion, then you can really understand if you're being effective with communication with other people. Great takeaway. I think it's really important for us to understand when we're communicating how it's actually showing up for others. All of Vicki's contact information is going to be on the episode website, so you can reach her through there. Also, if you haven't done so already, remember to take the promotion readiness checklist. I'm also going to put links in the episode website as well. If you want to figure out how to work with me, you can always schedule a strategy call, and you can click on or scan, I should say, the QR code over here if you're watching on YouTube, to figure out how you can join the Unlock the Leader Within membership, which we've been doing a lot of great work within the membership. With that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.